Welcome everyone to our event today. We're really glad that you can join us over your lunch breaks. We'll be introducing the Midwest Cover Crop Council's newly updated Cover Crop Selector Tool. So this Lunch and Learn is designed to be a two-part series. So don't forget to register for the next session, which will be April 22nd. We'll get that link into the chat towards the end of this event. Just to inform everyone, in the Zoom session, we are recording this meeting so that we can distribute the video to other people that signed up or people that weren't able to join us right now. And we're also streaming live to the Ohio TNC Agriculture Facebook page. All participants are muted, but feel free to come off of mute at the end when we're in the question and answer session to ask some questions, or use the chat to type in your questions. We'll be able to relay those to Sarah once she gets done with her presentation. Those are pretty much all the ground rules that we have. So I'm really excited to introduce everyone to Sarah Noggle. She is the OSU Extension Educator for Paulding County, as well as the state of Ohio's representative on the Midwest Cover Crop Council. So Sarah, whenever you're ready, you can take over.
Okay, well, thanks Erin and the Nature Conservancy for inviting me today. I appreciate this opportunity just to share with each one of you maybe one more tool to put in your toolbox as you're starting to use cover crops. So we're going to start off with a simple poll question, or I guess 3 poll questions all in one. So if you can take some time to answer that, that would be great.
So that should be live.
Okay. So my questions just for you as you're looking at that is, have you used the Midwest Cover Crop Tool Selector since it was updated in December of 2020? My second question for you is, do you have access to the SARE publication, Managing Cover Crops Profitably, the 3rd edition? And my last question is, do you have a copy of the Midwest Cover Crop Field Guide? Which, if you already didn't know, it's a friendly pocket-sized publication you can carry with you in the field. So it looks like we've got some answers. We'll share some of those results. So most people today, as I see, have not used that newly updated Midwest Cover Crop Tool Selector. Looks like so far all of our attendees, you do have a copy of Managing Cover Crops Profitably. And then you do, some of you have that Midwest Cover Crop Field Guide. So with that, I'm going to walk you through today some of the newly updated features of the Cover Crop Tool Selector, and then also how to use that. And so this tool selector is housed through our Midwest Cover Crop Council at Michigan State. And so that website is mccc.msu.edu/selector-tool. And again, this is a brand new platform for us. And we've added some things and taken some things away, trying to make this better. We're always up for comments as we change that around. And so as we go to that website today, I'm going to just kind of show you how to find those items. So across the top, when you get to the website, you'll see a home, a getting started, selector tools, species, states and provinces, other resources, about, and subscribe to the MCCC listserv. And so today we're going to focus on those selector tools in a 2-part series. So as you get into that, you will see 2 selector tools. There's one that's a row crop tool and a vegetable crop tool. Now the vegetable crop tool is not one we have available for Ohio. We don't have enough research and data for that vegetable crop tool, but we do have access to the row crop tool, and that's the part I'll focus on. So I talk about using this row crop tool for yourself. And so we start simply with pulling up that screen, and you'll actually see some information that they're going to ask you. I think you can use this in a number of different ways. The first way I'll share with you is by simply choosing your state and your county. And this tool is based on historical weather data. It's got freeze dates, frost dates, some rainfall, as it puts information into that selector tool. And so for my example today, I just chose Ohio and the county I'm from, which is Paulding County. The second thing that I will share is You can use this if you are a brand new user of cover crops from an educational aspect. And so this tool will show all the cover crops that we have available in the system here in Ohio. While there are others, we're always adding new ones. And that was one of the changes. We added some new species into this. Using the tool this way is a very basic option. So it will include things like the fly-free date with some of the cover crops, when there's a reliable establishment, maybe there's a freeze or a moisture risk, as you start to look at those cover crop tools. And so as we look at that, it brings those cover crops into an alphabetical list. And what you can do for your own education, maybe you don't have the SARE publication I shared at the beginning or the pocket guide, you can click on each one of those species where it's blue and where my cursor is going, and that will show you the different information sheets on each one of those species. And so you can read up, you can find things out. What that looks like when you click on that is Ohio data. And so if you click print this page, it will work for you just to simply print. The other thing, each one of the boxes like location, planting, termination, performance and roles, cultural traits, potential advantages and disadvantages, those are drop downs. If you click on one of those, it's going to give you that information that we have based on our Ohio information. Things that are new for the tool selector, we added some other resources at the bottom. And so it does show where we had some of that referenced information. And then it actually shows a little bit above and beyond what's on the information sheet. These are nice 1 to 2 page printable sheets. The other thing is, if you are using this tool, we have some links to other publications that maybe you need to think about. The list on this one has some of the basics going above and beyond, but it also will talk about if there are some restrictions with programs such as H2 Ohio, the things like if there's an FSA program or a soil and water program, it will have some of the information based on that. The one new thing that maybe I'm not as big about, but I'm going to say this a few times during my presentation, is there is a button that will float around the screen that says see updated results. If you make changes in here or add more information, you have to click on that see updated results. It just doesn't automatically do that. But as you start to use your education, you can click to display those cover crops by type or group those by type. And so it will change it out of that alphabetical list. So just a simple step that makes it a little more readily available for each one of you. I think the more information you use and put into this, the more things you'll get out of it. And so we'll start with using the options of adding goals. And so this tool selector allows you to add up to 3 goals total. And those goals are simply from a drop-down menu after you have selected your state and county. And if you add a second goal, you'll just hit the add goal, the plus button. So pretty simple to use, a little more user-friendly. One of the things that I think when we talk about goals are something that you need to fit for your farm. And so as you start to look at these cover crops, starting simple with 1 goal is probably the best option in the beginning as you're using this for your education. Our goal options are erosion fighter, mechanical forage harvest value, if it's good grazing, grain seed harvest value, interseed with a cash crop, lasting residue, nitrogen scavenge, nitrogen source, quick growth soil builder, or weed fighter. And my one big thing when we talk about goals is that if you start to look at those, my definition of what a goal is might not be the same as your definition. And so if I talked about a soil builder, if I asked someone in the audience, well, what do you think is the definition of soil builder? Your answer and my answer might be something different. But the one thing that I will say when you look at those, this is going to reference that Managing Cover Crops Profitably guide. And you can download that for free. It's a PDF downloadable, or you can purchase that. I like to have that paper copy with me. But those goal definitions, how they're fitting in this selector tool, are based on the definitions in this booklet. And so that's one thing I always share with people, that make sure you're looking at those, because what you think is a soil builder might not be the same thing. And so remember those things. So once you have chose a goal, you need to understand how it sorts things out in the tool selector. And so it will sort those out as a order of excellent to poor, 4 being excellent, and then they have clear down to very good, good, fair, and poor on 0. The one thing that I will share with you is they put those, if the goal is a 4 or it comes to the top as ranking of a 4, it just then puts those in alphabetical order. It doesn't mean that at the top of the list, that's the best one for that county in your chosen state. So just remember that all 4s are equal, just looking at timing of when you need those cover crops. The other thing that's been added is understanding some of the other keys. If you put a goal in and you see down below, for example, red clover, you have a snowflake, that just means that frost seeding could be an option, and it won't show up in the chart at the side. Again, once you start to add those goals, you'll have the opportunity to click now on the blue button or the blue species, and it will pull up that PDF again. It just will add in the information. So the more you put in, the more information it changes on that information sheet. So for example, if I used erosion fighter as my first goal and soil builder as my second goal, it will then pull a species that has 2 number 4s to the top of the list, keeping those in order, or a 4 and a 3, as you can see in my picture. And again, alphabetical order with those. So simple tool just to start to see what are those goals, and I need some more information. But again, the more you put in, the more you get out. Again, adding a 3rd goal, just hit that plus goal. The other thing that we add in is showing our cash crop and drainage class for the selector tool. And if you use goals, cash crop, and drainage, you'll get the most out of this tool. And so this is where you're really planning. I say with cover crops, you need to be 5 steps ahead and have probably plan A, B, C, and D in your toolbox, because sometimes things change with each one of these species. And knowing that information, I think, makes you more apt to use that cover crop again or understand how that works. So as you choose a cash crop, it's just a drop-down menu, and you can choose that, and then they're going to ask you an approximate planting date and an approximate harvest date. And so I just use that example. If we were planting soybeans May 12th, harvesting October 13th, just as an example. The other thing on that one is the drainage options. And so when you click select a drainage option, you will see things like no drainage, very poorly drained soil, poorly drained, somewhat poorly drained, moderately well drained, excessive drain, muck saturated, or muck well drained. And then on the other side of that are flooding options. And so those flooding options, is there no flooding? Is it brief up to 7 days, longer than 7 days? And again, a reminder to click that see updated results, the more information you put in. In the middle of the screen underneath drainage, it will ask you, do you have field tile established? Yes or no. And so as we add more information, you'll start to see where it's a reliable establishment, a freeze to moisture risk to establishment. Those will show up in green and yellow bars. And then it will overlay, once you put in your growing crop, a gray bar to show this is the time where I have my cash crop planted, and here are my options. And so when you think of things, if you are doing this for soil health, that's one way you're using it. But sometimes people are using this because there's a program that comes up and they don't know any information. And so maybe that program gives you a list of species that they say you have to choose one of these. Well, will it really fit in the rotation that I'm using, is how this tool is used. Again, it still ranks those, and you can still also change this to group them by type based on a scenario if they were both 4s with the goals that we had used. So as you get results, maybe you forgot which goals you put in. You can see those if you hover over them, or the list is, as it's longer, you can see each species. It will tell you how that's ranked. Again, clicking on that species to see that blue bar and see that info sheet. So the info sheet, as we start to look at that, again, you have to click on each one to drop down that information. So if we were choosing our soybeans and we wanted to look at winter cereal rye, we can see, hey, here's what I put in as goals. Here's my drilled seeding depth. Here's my drilled seeding rate. What if I'm going to broadcast this? can I aerial seed that? And so as you get that information, again, that's my caution, that these are based on getting that cover crop to grow, not necessarily what's required of a program. So while we give you a recommendation, make sure you follow all the information. And that's one of the reasons why I say you need to be 5 to 10 steps ahead of the game. So for just a second, I'm going to throw another poll question up there. And so this question is, have you ever used the Midwest Cover Crop Council's beginning recipes for cover crops on their website? So yes, no, or no, please send me information on how to download those recipes. So it looks like we're about 50-50 split on those. And so one of you have, and one of you have not used that. So I think those are some of the extra, even more so using the cover crop tool selector. So those beginning recipes then will show up, and I call this digging a little deeper. And we have 2 of those with 3 more to come for Ohio that are being reviewed right now. We have one post corn going to soybeans using cereal rye. We have one post soybeans going to corn, use oats and radish. And so one of the things with the selector tool that we did delete from there are some of the mixes. That information is being worked on right now to add back in. And so hopefully starting in 2022, we'll have where you can use that selector tool and then say, maybe I want to do an oats radish mix. Well, what's that rate that I need to seed that at based on the way I'm going to get that cover crop growing? And so remembering those things are key, starting small. And in part 2, we'll talk a little bit more about going a little more in depth than what we're sharing today. The other part of digging deeper that I shared in the survey at the beginning was that Cover Crops Field Guide 2nd edition. And you can get those via the Purdue Publications store. This covers the 12 states that are in the Midwest Cover Crops Council plus Ontario. So it has some information for those. I really like this because the one thing that I'm a picture person, the selector tool doesn't give you a picture of the species, what it looks like, seed size, when it's growing, maybe when it's flowering. And so this field guide currently shows you those pictures and that real quick information. It's great to throw in your truck, glove box to have with you in your pocket. It's a reference I use all the time. And we're also in the process of updating that one, but that won't be out again until 2022, a newer version of that with new species. So with that, I'll share my contact information. I'm happy to work with any of you at any time. If you have questions, getting started, how to go through some of the different selector tool scenarios, and we're going to work through that next week in part 2, or next month, I'm sorry, in part 2 of our series. So with that, I will take any questions that anyone has.
Yeah, for those of you that are in the Zoom session, feel free to take yourselves off mute and ask Sarah any questions you might have. And I see we do have someone that's joined us live on Facebook from Brazil, so that's exciting.
That's it, exciting.
Sarah?
Yes.
One of the things that we talked about is the need for management skills, the fact that you need to have a plan, and then when the weather or something else comes up, you need to have plan B, C, and D. Is there somewhere in the Cover Crop Council Selector Guide that gives you a little bit of this management thought process?
So in the advantages and disadvantages of those species, that will give you some of the things to think about. Sometimes it's a caution, like this will take up any of your excess moisture, or this one, you know, it won't even establish in, you know, a very wet season. And so as you think through those, it's more on the information sheet when you click on that blue species, but it makes a good info sheet just to share some of those, while sometimes working with each other shows some of those other experiences. This one covers everything to think about. And I think that's key when you're planning to use these with that plan A, B, C. You think about the weather, you think about timing, your management. And I think the one thing people forget a lot of the time is, how am I going to terminate this? You're worried about getting it planted, but that part of your plan needs to be, how am I going to manage and then also terminate this species? Great question. Thank you.
The other thing that I'm wondering too about is certain of our cover crop species, herbicides don't play nice with. Is there something on the cover crop sheets that will tell you to watch out for group 17s or group 25s? Or
so that is not included on the selector tool because of the changes of different herbicides coming out each year. But we do have on the Midwest Cover Crops Council website some of those links to the herbicide guides across many states, whether it's, you know, corn, silage, soybeans, you know, wheat. What are some of those chemicals that you are using to control weeds, and maybe what are they doing and how long are they sitting there in the soil? And maybe that's one of the things, and I think I talked last night just about this in a meeting. Sometimes people don't think about what's that carryover of that herbicide. And so as we walk through next month with Pete Dinius, we'll share some of those things and those cautions a little above and beyond, but not in the actual selector tool.
will the species selector tool, will they also have something about if they can grow well in shaded type of situation? So if you want to interseed later in the season, you've got a chance if you've got the moisture to get them up and growing.
So the interseeding option is actually one of the goals. And so I recommend if you're thinking about interseeding, that you make that one of the goals as you start to select those species. And it will rank those based on interseeding and then tell you, and again, interseeding, it will pull any species it could be interseeded into and rank them in that order. But you need to then read on the info sheet. So make sure you add that as a goal with using that, and then see your updated results and then click on the species that you might be wanting to use. So it builds off of each other.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, so I have a question for you, Sarah. You had mentioned at the beginning that this cover crop selector tool can be a great educational resource. So my question for you is, what is the biggest question that most producers forget when they're planning to use or they're selecting cover crops for the very first time?
I think the biggest thing that they forget to plan, if they are in a system that they are using herbicides, they forget to look at what could be sitting there in that soil already. And then those of you who are not using any herbicides in your crop rotations, I think it's just having that plan and saying, okay, if the spring is really wet and I thought I was going to do A, what about B? And so knowing a little bit about those species, I think working through with yourself is, you know, you're your best educator. And so maybe trying a smaller area of those, you know, as you start to develop into those. The other thing I think is that they don't have that termination plan in mind. Like, how am I going to terminate that? Because we're worried about getting that established. So those, I guess that's kind of three things to think about when they're starting.
That's good. Well, we do have a little bit of a delay with our feed on Facebook. We've got a couple people on there, so I am gonna just stall a little bit here. If there are any more questions from the Zoom group, we can go ahead and ask them. But we also, as we mentioned earlier, this is a two-part series. The second part of this session will be April 22nd. It's going to be a great session. Sarah is actually going to walk a farmer through the cover crop selector tool, and you'll be able to watch how this process goes. It's a great opportunity to learn how to use the tool or maybe how you can sort of frame your strategy and thought process as you're getting ready to plan using cover crops for the first time on your farm. And I don't see any more questions coming in either location. So I think we can wrap it up. Sarah, you did say that you had one last question for the audience, and maybe also for the Facebook audience if they're watching the video a little bit later. And those are, what are some other research opportunities that you would like to see with cover crops with Ohio State Extension and other research partners?
Yes, and one of the things I think with our county extension office, we're willing to partner with producers around the area just to set up those trials and to work through those. And I think it's a great opportunity to partner up, put some thought process into how you're setting that trial up and some of the ins and outs of that before you even get started.
All right. Well, if that's all from the group, we'd like to say a big thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah, for putting this presentation together and coming and joining us for the luncheon. And thank you to all those who've joined us here in Zoom as well as on Facebook. We hope this was useful and helpful. We'll see you April 22nd, again at noon for the second part of this series. And we hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.
Thanks, everyone.